bud.
What you got there, bud?
Got an old International there, buddy. Old 13-liter manure spreader.
Come on.
Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. We've got something cool for you guys the next couple of videos. Well, I say cool. If you don't like Internationals, well, you're gonna have a really hard time.
Yeah, you better like Internationals.
Because we're fixing to get down on the International extravaganza. Okay guys, so we brought the 71 1210 in the shop today. For those of y'all who don't know this truck, I bought this truck out of Tennessee. You might have seen it on the Instagram page, I think. We might have put it on Facebook. I don't think we've done anything YouTube-wise with the truck. You might have seen it in the background or something, but we hadn't really introduced it. Pretty cool truck. Let me check it out real quick. It's a 71 3/4 ton camper special. Doesn't have anything really. It's kind of a no frills truck. It's got a heater, came with a CB, but really original truck. 71,000 original miles on it. It's got a decent bed. Runs good. 14 gears, Dana 60 in the back, 44 HD. It's got a closed knuckle axle in the front, drum brakes all the way around. I'm rocking a 304 2-barrel. It's got MP 435 4-speed transmission and an MP 205 transfer case that's divorced.
And these cherry hubcaps.
Yeah, dude, I found these things freaking new old stock from a dude in Ohio.
We got IH locking hubs. Okay, somewhere in there it focuses. We got the OG hubcaps. And we're on 9x16 Power Kings.
Had those sitting.
I mean,
the tires are like 25 years old.
This thing looks killer. All right, so what are you gonna do? You're gonna yank your 2-barrel off?
Yeah. So we bought a dump truck also, and part of this whole International.
This is the dump truck, by the way.
Videos is gonna be covering nothing but Internationals. So this thing's got a 345 in it, also with a 2300 Holley 2-barrel, but it leaks really bad. I think the float bowl's been JB welded. It was literally shooting fuel out of the vent, but the motor runs. And we need a carburetor, and this carb would be perfect for that dump truck because we're not gonna be pulling out in traffic. Way lower gears, so tip-in throttle, none of that.
Yeah, it's like off-road use only, really, with the dump truck.
So again, we reached out to our friends over at Holley. Those guys always have our back anytime we get in an issue or in a bind with anything fuel-related on gas stuff. They come through super clutch. So I've got a couple of boxes over here full of some goodies that we got to install in this thing. We're going to be doing fuel supply pump, the Holley Sniper kit, and we're going to go through the install on that. Take the carb off, put the Sniper on, make this thing run like it's supposed to, and well, better than it ever was actually. You can see what I've got over here. I got some wire nuts. That's how I bought it from the dude. Wire nuts on the fender well. Got a red rag to keep this thing from overheating. Looks like a perfect fuel pump to put on the dump truck, if you ask me.
Yeah, for sure.
But I daily this truck in the wintertime. It doesn't have an AC in it, so I've driven it a bunch in the summer, but it's hotter than hell.
Yeah.
But whenever it gets cold, this thing is just, it's awesome to drive. It gets a lot of attention. They're pretty rare trucks because they're all usually rusted back into the earth. So it was really cool to be able to get this set up from Holley. Can't thank those guys enough. I'm really excited to see this thing run as good as it can, because the motor's really solid on this thing. So, stack of goodies. Let me flip this around. So first off, we got the tape's still in the box. 2300 Sniper. This is the same basic dimension as the 2300 2-barrel. So same bolt pattern, looks very similar, but way more badass. That's sitting in the box with all of its harness and stuff to attach. Got sent the rubber line and steel line, the compression fitting to AN adapters, all these from Mr. Gasket. All this stuff comes, Holley is basically the parent company to all this stuff. So all your Earl's fittings, everything those guys make. Mallory ignition, this is the inline fuel pump. They sent me the rings for the line and the pliers to do it, and then all these fittings here to adapt to be able to use the steel line or to use rubber line. We may use a combination of both, but I can't even tell you. Whenever I say these guys at Holley have our back, these dudes really do. I wasn't playing, man. Look at this. This is everything it's going to take to do this install. Super legit and make it very, very reliable. So we're going to cover this the very best that we possibly can, going through the process. Right now we're still working on teardown, so y'all hang in there, and then we're going to start throwing some goodies on as soon as we get the old off. see what's in the box. I don't even know what finish is on this thing. There's a couple different finishes. Yeah, dude. Look at this thing. Friggin' sweet, bruh. So similar dimensions to the original 2300 two-barrel carburetor. So they takes up basically the same footprint, and the cool thing is because they're both Holley, the linkages between the two, as far as making throttle linkage and all that work, should be really straightforward. I ought to be able to move this pivot ball from this lever over to here, make a really slight adjustment, be able to use my original linkage. The harness couldn't be more simple. Plug it in, you got power, ground, key on power, and you need a signal from the coil, so you go to the negative side of the coil. That's super easy. Inside here is the harness for the O2 sensor and for the monitor, which you use to set it up. Basic parameters, cubic inch displacement, camshaft stuff. You know, you pick mild, wild, whatever, somewhere in between. And you can actually do tuning above and beyond what this thing does self-learning. But from my experience, they've worked really, really well. We did one on Demo Matt's Toyota. That thing runs like a champion. We've done several since then. Every single one of them has worked flawless. So base plate gasket in here. We're going to throw that on here in just a second. Logan's almost done. And get ready to mount this thing up. So intake has been sanded down. Look how nice that is. Seeing those sand scratches all the way across there like that lets you know that you've made it down to where it's completely level. So that thing's been cleaned off, wiped and cleaned. We're going to set this down on here. Line the gasket up. Set our throttle body on there. Logan, I'm going to hand this to you, brother. Looks like it pretty clean on the bottom. A few little nicks, but nothing crazy. All right. And then I went and got 4 bolts from the Lawson bin. Love these guys. Lawson fasteners, Lawson products, everything these guys have. Top of the line. We've got this thing mounted up here now, and I want to make sure the throttle's not going to hang. Looks good. Something you always want to check anytime you replace a carburetor. I have certainly done it on accident. Set the thing on there, don't look at the linkage, tighten the bolts down, only to find out that you're a freaking 1/8 of an inch. You know, you need an 1/8 of an inch spacer because the linkage is touching, and you may have just bought yourself a carburetor or ruined your fuel injection. So definitely don't do that. Check for fitment. But generally speaking, if you pulled a 2300 Holley 2-barrel off, this thing should basically bolt on linkage and base plate orientation wise and not give you any problems. So we're going to snug that thing down, and we've basically done the easiest part of this job, which is to pull the carb and to set the throttle body on it. Everything else, well, it's going to take a little bit more time. We're going to hook up the electrical, tap into the coil wire, 12-volt ignition, all of that, run the harness inside the cab to the monitor. So yeah, those things are a little bit more time consuming, but it sure looks cool.
It does.
Looks like some kind of rocket ship stuff on a really old antique. All right, I gotta get down here and help Luke before he quits. All right, so we've got to get all the gas out of the tank so that we can put weld bungs in it. So I went and grabbed this thing. It's kind of cool. I don't know if I'm going to show it to the people who haven't seen one before. It's called a magic siphon, and it's got a BB in this end, like a little glass marble, and this little kind of venturi that's here. And you take it and set it down in the fuel, and you shake it like this. And when you push this way against the fluid, it bypasses the BB and puts fluid past it. And then when you pull back, it seals it. And what that does is allow you to kind of siphon fuel up in the line until gravity takes over, and then it will actually gravity feed into a can. Now that should be working. Yeah, now it's gravity feeding. Anyway, kind of a cool little deal. What I've got here is a controlled little, just use the zip tie on the blowgun. And what I'm trying to do is get all the gas vapor out of the tank, because I'm fixing to have to weld on it and put a weld bung in the top for the return and a weld bung in the bottom. A weld bung, not a bug. in the bottom for the pickup for the fuel pump. So. Well, I guess I got all the gas vapor out. I had my fuel pump out here, the Mallory fuel pump that's going to feed high pressure fuel up to the Sniper, and because the fuel tank on this truck, it's got 2 saddle tanks, because of the way that it sits and the fact that I need that pump mounted as low as possible so that it's gravity feeding. I'm decided to mount this inboard as low as possible on the frame, and so it's going to sit about, the inlet's about this far above the bottom of the tank. So the bottom of the tank sits about here, and the inlet to the fuel pump is like right here. So it's as close as I can get to gravity feeding without stuff hanging below the frame rail, and I think it's going to work just fine. I don't cruise around on an empty tank all the time. Very rarely do I ever do that, so I'm not really concerned about that at all. So this is what it looks like on the inside here. Let me get this light set up. So it's kind of tight right here on this edge, where I've got the transfer case here and the exhaust pipe running down this side. So there's only about 2 fingers worth of room here, and there's plenty of room up inside here, but it's just kind of a pain in the ass to get your hands in here. But either way, was able to get it done and got the 4 bolts mounted up there. And I've got my inline fuel filter, the pre-filter, sitting right here, and I've got a P clamp on it, and I drilled a hole in the frame, so I've got those lined up pretty damn good right there. So I'm going to get a measurement on that and pull those fittings off. Try to get my light right here. I'm going to pull this fitting off and this fitting off once I get a measurement, and I'm going to take it out and use these Earl's crimps. That way I don't have hose clamps to tighten up. Okay, so I've got the 2 fittings off that we were looking at underneath there. The one from the pre-filter to the fuel pump, which is this one, and then the straight thread O-ring or our ORB O-ring bung adapter that comes that goes into the suction side of the fuel pump, and it's associated fitting. So I measured that underneath the truck, and I've got this much hose. So I'm going to use these pretty cool crimps, these little line crimps that they sent me from Earl's, and use these pair of pliers to crimp them. And they work pretty simply. You slide it over the hose and onto the barb, and then you crunch this back piece, and it takes up the slack around the perimeter of it. And it's kind of like, they use these on drive shaft boots and stuff like that. It keeps constant tension, and I don't know what they're made out of. I don't know if they're stainless steel, but it goes with the Earl's Vapor Guard hose. It says on the package Vapor Guard hose clamp, and I haven't used these before. I've seen them used in OE stuff a lot. I've reused a bunch of them on like drive shaft stuff, because they've got this little lock that runs over the side of it here, this little tab, and you can bend this tab back up and work this off and kind of straighten this out, and reuse it. It's got these little teeth right here that kind of ratchet down. They ratchet down once you get over the top, and then you use this other leg to lock it. And I've been able to reuse them before, and I mean, I think it's a pretty good design. I'm certainly it looks very OE on the install, so it looks really clean. So I'm excited to try them out and see how they work out. Put a little lube on there. Slide this on, just like that, and then this slides over the top of the hose, and you use these pliers and crimp it down. So hose goes on, slide this thing over, then we're gonna grab this edge and actually crunch this edge down a little bit and take up the slack. So let me get it right there, and then compress that. And that puts a good, yeah dude, that's a really good feeling crimp right there. And so now that's got all that tension on it, and it stays that way. And you can see it kind of wrinkled the edge of the hose up a little bit right there because it bit in pretty hard. Looks good, it's clean. I like it. And what I'll be able to do is when I need to service this thing, because these are swivel ends, this hose, I'll be able to loosen this side, and kind of flex that hose out and get it back in anytime I need to replace that pre-filter. So
you did something right.
run.
Sounds like you got it set pretty close to where it needs to be.
Let it run for a second so I can set up. Okay, I'm pretty happy now.
Sounds good. Still got a little learning to do, but
Yeah, no, but I mean, we've been
sounds
sitting
good.
here idling for probably about 10 minutes, and I need to still mount the monitor in the cab. I ran the wrong cable in there. I ran the one with the USB, so I need to mount the monitor in there, but idle air control position sitting between 2 and 10. 6 to 8 seems to work the best most of the time. Everything's looking good. Coolant temps at 180. Battery's already charged back up. Just
ready for a test drive.
yeah, so that's cool. I think that the install on this thing was a little more difficult because it's an international. The style of fuel tank, the having to work around some of the things like the thermostat housing and the placement of stuff definitely made it a little bit more of a challenge, but I'm really excited to see how this thing runs and drives. It's already way more responsive. The motor sounds so much more happy. I'm stoked, dude.
Cool. Well,
Glad it's over, though,
Yeah.
to be honest.
let's get some junk pushed out of the way here and go for a spin.
Let's do it. All right, guys, so I've had the Holley Sniper on here now for probably about, I guess it's right around 3 or 4 days. And dude, let me tell you what, when they say win with Holley, they're not playing, dude. Winning is what's happening, because the drivability of this thing is ridiculous. Hold on, I'm trying to pop the hood and hold this camera, so I had a Holley 2300 2-barrel on there, as y'all know, and so after visiting with our friends over at Holley about what I was dealing with and what I wanted to potentially do with this thing, they hooked it up and sent the Holley Super Sniper 2300, and the Super Sniper has 4 100-pound injectors in it instead of 2, and what that means is there's plenty of fuel there if you want to add a supercharger or a turbo. The map sensor is set up to read 21.5 psi, so 1.5 bar. Pretty freaking sweet. They're talking about 600 plus horsepower is what this thing is capable of supporting. So I don't know if I'm willing to turbo this thing or not, but we do have a lot of turbos laying around, and it would be pretty freaking cool. So we've been talking about it. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment if you think we ought to put a turbo on this thing. But the deal is, the drivability of this, legitness factor, we lost some originality by getting rid of the manual choke 2300 2-barrel carburetor. But I'm telling you, the legitness level of drivability, cold start, hot start, the tip-in throttle response, I can tell you right now, the fuel economy is dramatically better. I think that the main body on that 2-barrel was leaking into the Venturi, so I had my oil level would actually rise sometimes. Like if I didn't turn the lift pump off, it had a lift pump on a toggle switch that was feeding the carburetor, and if I didn't turn that thing off and let it run the fuel out of the bowl when I went to park it, then every time I started it to be extremely rich, I'd have to hold the pedal wide open on the floor and crank it for sometimes maybe 10 rotations to get it to fire off. And it smelled real heavy out the tailpipe. I am almost certain the emissions level of this thing had been cut in half. But just in general, the way that this thing idles, the way that it sounds, the way that it drives, dude, it is a ridiculous difference. If you've been on the fence about doing it and you've dealt with carburetor issues, and you're not completely freaked out about 100% originality, I'm telling you, this thing is worth every single penny and every minute of labor that it took to install it. It was I won't say labor intensive, it was time consuming to do it. This truck has dual tanks on it, one under the driver's seat, one under the driver's side of the truck, and one on the passenger side, outboard of the frame rail, like saddle tanks. And so I've got the passenger one plumbed, which was the one that was the most refinished or cleanest. Somebody had pulled it out and boiled it at one time, so I welded a bung in the bottom of it and ran the fuel line over to the fuel pump from it. And the plan is in the future is to use, I think I'm going to use a transfer pump to just simplify the process, where I can use both tanks, and I'll fill the driver's side tank and I'll just watch the fuel gauge on the passenger tank, and if it gets to low, I think I'll flip the switch on the dash, maybe the one for auxiliary fuel. I can kind of wire it up to make the electric fuel pump come on and transfer fuel from the driver's tank to the passenger tank. I think that's going to be the easiest moving forward. I know Holley makes basically a valve with a selector switch to run 2 tanks. The supply and returns, you flip a switch and I'm assuming there's a rotating valve on the inside that opens and closes the supply and return ports so that you can split from one tank to another and run a common fuel pump. So that may be an option. I don't know. We're going to have to look at it and see. But anyway, I just wanted to say that after a few days of driving this thing, it is an absolute pleasure to drive when it runs the way that it does. It is the best running international that I've probably ever driven. And I've had a bunch of them. I've had several of them with 304s in there, and they've never been really impressive unless I was in low range, you know. Then there was more than enough power. Been sitting here for about an hour and a half, and I want to fire it up so you can see how quick this thing fires up. So I've kind of got, right now, I've got the system just sitting here. I've got it all coiled up. I had the USB for the laptop in here, just ran wild, and then I've got the cable with the monitor just sitting here on the shifter because I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to put it just yet. So that's why that's just chilling there. The other thing is I don't have a key on power that's also 12 volts while cranking, except for the coil, and I'm not going to tie that power into the Sniper. I just feel like it's a bad idea, and I think even in their instructions they say do not tap into the hot side of the coil to power it. You may end up with some type of issue, but for now what I'm using is the toggle switch that's in here for the lift pump that used to feed the carburetor. And what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to attach to either the starter solenoid or the positive side of the coil to energize a relay, and let the relay carry the load, which is minimal obviously, to turn this thing on and keep power to it while cranking. It's important that it has that. I know that because I didn't have it hooked up that way initially. I thought for whatever reason that this was powered, the switch was powered when the key was plunged to start the whole time, and so I just took it for granted and hooked it up that way, and I had some issues getting this thing to fire up. And I'm like, dude, what's the deal? Well, with the test light, I had Steven under the hood with the test light, plunged the key, it was losing power to this thing, and so the fuel pump would prime, it would crank, it'd fire, and it would die, because by the time the computer recovered and turned back on, the engine had already stalled. So anyway, bottom line is I need to hook up a relay so that while I'm cranking, I have 12 volt constant to this, and then after it's running, obviously the key on power 12 volt will keep that thing energized. So for now I have that being done by this switch. So I'll hit the switch, monitor turns on. I don't know if you can see it because of the sun, but there's all that, and then hit the key, and it's about 2 rotations. Well, it didn't even rotate an entire revolution, and we're sitting here running. It's cycling through the idle air control position. You can see kind of gently bringing it down to idle, which I have set at about 700 RPM, 725 maybe. It's freaking legit, man. The throttle response, let's see, coolant temps at 134. The throttle response, dude, I'm telling you, worth every penny. I love driving this truck. It's making me want to go through the rest of the stuff that it needs to be completely, basically, I mean, to me, cherry. And if you ask me, you know, what it takes to make something reliable, or what my what makes me happy with the older trucks that I've got, very little time, in my opinion, is spent on fixing the rust repair. I typically don't buy them anymore with the floor pans completely gone, but I'm not so much about the paint and the rust. It's about the drivability and the driveline, or the brakes, the transmission, T-case, all that stuff good. And that's really the only thing that this truck really needs touched up on. I either have a little bit of a bend in the wheel, or these old bias ply tires just wobble a lot until they warm up. But I've got some rollover, I think, in the trans and the transfer case. I've checked all the U-joints. All that stuff's pretty tight, so I think that it probably just needs bearings. I think it probably had a gear oil leak for a long time, and it probably got run either dry or really close to dry, and it probably chewed some of the life and the tolerance off the bearings and stuff in there. So I'm going to pull the trans and the T-case and go through them. The ring and pinions seem like they're good. All my wheel bearings are good. I replaced the master cylinder not long ago, so the brakes are pretty solid. What I was trying to get at was the Sniper has made the thing run so good that it's pushed me to finish the other things around it. Like, it's motivated me to do it because it runs so well and it's so much more fun to drive. So anyway, I tried to make a quick update out of this. This has been 11 minutes and 30 seconds of me talking about the truck. So thanks for hanging in there if you're still in there, and bring you some more updates soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Later.